I'd just like to say the Abbotsford Convent is a very important place to the Wurundjeri community because we are the oldest traditional owner community in Victoria. My grandmother's sister, Only Winnie, set up the Wurundjeri Land Council in the mid-80s, and it was something new back then, as the Land Council was set up to protect and manage our culture, our cultural heritage, preserve it, and so we can pass it on and keep it strong. Before that, all our Aboriginal organisations were social organisations dealing with the many social issues that we had in the Aboriginal community. 2008, I think it was, we got our offices up in the Providence building there. Between 1985 and 2008, Wurundjeri Land Council was run out of people's houses, bedrooms, and lounge rooms, and so forth. We are the busiest traditional owner group in Victoria, as a lot of our main work is around protection and management of cultural heritage, and cultural heritage is out in the landscape. And what are they doing to the landscape? They're developing it at the faster rate than ever has happened in the history of this land. So we try to protect and manage what's out there, but not stop progress, because we drive on roads, we use pipelines, and we live in houses, just like you fellas. So we're not there to stop it, but we're there to, I suppose, manage it, and also around the environmental values as well, because cultural values and environmental values are the same thing. The cultural values is just the human interaction within that environment. See, what they got wrong in 2009 was locking up the bush and not utilising it, letting it build up a lot of fuels and so forth, and when we had the hot weather and the fire, no one could control it, not even the old people if they were here. So utilising the resources, but very wisely, very smartly and very sustainably. And we have to think more and more like that now, because never ever has this size population lived on Wurundjeri land in its human history of tens of thousands of years. So feel free to ask questions. I'm going to try and be up the lead here, so if you've got a keen question to ask, try and catch up. But we've only got a short time, so we'll move along and just watch yourselves with the bike track and that. Obviously, they tried to cover a lot of bases within their name.
Yeah.
So, things like land rights were very strong back then.
Yeah.
Now it's native title.
Yeah.
They're different things. So, if you go around the Kulin Nation, so Jaja Warang, Warang, Dun Warang, Tanarong, Bun Warang, Nura Ilam Warang, all those front parts of the word mean no. So no lips, no talk. But it doesn't actually translate that in English where, I'm not going to talk to you. It's the only distinguishment between the language names, and that's why that suffix, I'm not sure. Yeah, well, as soon as you come down the hill, down through the cutting over the river,
over the Yarra.
That's all Corrandirk land right in front of you.
Yep.
My grandmother was born there.
Oh, yeah.
It's Land Council's main focus. But the white fella bring money to our country, so we've got to make money to survive.
Nick O'Neill's very excited about the whole thing.
Weed and replanted stuff and tree veg and that,
It's interesting what you were saying about the fire stick farming too,
yeah.
and the use of the fire here.
Yeah, look, I know there's quite a few here, so we're going to have to jam them all in, but yeah.
The freeway's so low, I just
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it's 3 now.
Yeah, what time do you want to be back?
We'll be back about it.
Now, can anyone there is a suburb in Melbourne that carries the traditional name of this river. Does anyone know it?
Yarra.
No. I knew I'd get that as an answer. White fella asked my ancestor, what do you call a river? Misunderstanding of language. Yada yada. Yada means flowing water, flowing hair, flowing beard, even represents the flowing motion up in the sky of comets. It's not the Yarra. Give you a clue, there's a park at the back of Federation Square.
Birrarung.
Birrarung Ma. The suburb of Birrarung comes from Birrarung, which comes from Birrarung. Birrarung means misty river or mist on the river. And that is the traditional name of our sacred river here, which is a symbol of our physical and spiritual connection to the land. And I suppose talking about sound and culture and how it makes you all feel. Well, I was just discussing before. I brought my kids up in a place called Cranbourne, which is noisy and busy and lots of people. I moved out recently up bush, up back at Maryborough, where there's peace and quiet and just nature that you can hear. To me, it relaxes me. It slows me down. It gives me a space from, I suppose, all the pressures of daily living and so forth like that. So coming out bush makes me feel like that. And listening to the animals of the area, the waterways, or not listening at all, the quietness even, is very important. This here is what we call the food and fibre garden. It's a work in progress, but just to give you a bit of an idea, you're standing amongst native grasses there, and the difference between the native grasses and the grasses that have come from overseas is that I call them carpeting grasses. They cover the landscape, the foreign grasses here on country. The more bush clump setup of the traditional grasses allows gaps between the grasses where all our traditional foods grew. Well, not all of them, but the majority of staple foods. So yam daisies, we call murnong, chocolate lily, bulbine lily, vanilla lily. These tuberous type orchids or lilies would grow amongst the gaps, and when fire comes through, it opens it up even more for more light and fertilisation through ash. So we're on a learning journey about fire, and I'm actually going up to North Queensland in a couple of weeks to experience their fire techniques up there. But in general, traditional fire is not burning the bush. If you burn the canopy and the trees, you're not burning traditionally. You burn the understory, the undercarriage, the grasses and things like that. And it's done at a time when you start feeling the mist on the, not feeling it, or you might feel it if you get wet feet, but on the grass, or the dew on the grass. The atmosphere's starting to cool. We're going through it now. The season started about 4 or 5 weeks ago, but it's still in fire season. And so you can control it better. You haven't got those hot northerlies, those obvious things about, when you don't light a fire and when it's dangerous. The old people didn't do that. So fire was used to manage landscape. The European noted every 3 to 5 years, landscapes were burnt in a fire regime. Some of the Europeans, though, got it messed up because they thought big fires were lit in the bush to chase the kangaroo out. Those big fires were lit to chase them out and get them away from their tradition, from their women and kids and so forth, because that was before the times of any trust was built. And look, as early as 1803, 32 years before John Batman got here, Charles Grimes came up the Birrarung River to a place called Solomon's Ford, which relates to this place actually. And he saw the smallpox epidemic had already hit this part of the country, and it took out, we believe, between 90 and 99% of the population of what I call the Two Bays district, the Port Phillip and Western Port areas. And it came down what we call the Hume Highway songline. The reason we call it that is because the Hume Highway was a horse and cart track. Horse and cart tracks were Aboriginal trading routes and songlines. And we found the songline, and it's not a good one. It's pretty depressing. So just to give you a little bit of an insight. So if you ever do have an interest in learning about or reading about history through the history documents, always keep that in mind, that a non-Indigenous person's writing it. What is their background? What's their perspectives? What's their motives? Who were they working for? And did they understand what they were writing in the first place? Plus, the majority of the culture was decimated already. So always tell people to keep that in mind if you are a bit of a history buff. Because I was saying earlier that We have a lot of problems with government at the moment, even our own people, through boundary discussions, native title discussions. If it's not written in the history book, it doesn't carry any weight with any decision makers, and it really frustrates me because oral histories are part of our traditional way of communicating. Now, yes, they were heavily severed. In 1863, the language, Wurrung, and cultural practice, ceremonial and family obligations through culture had become, I say illegal because it wasn't officially illegal as such, but if you did it, you were removed off the mission because it was Christian based. You had to become a Christian to live on Aboriginal missions. And if you didn't, you were taken off and you had nowhere to go. All the land was already grabbed and all the waterways were already fenced off. And a lot of the early towns in Victoria did not want Aboriginal people living within them. The only ones that could have survived are any ones that might have had white skin or non-Aboriginal features as such, maybe through a second generation European connection through their grandparents or something like that. But yeah, so the mission stations, it was a compromise, but you got to compromise sometimes when you're in survival mode. So that's what the old people did, and that's why they're so amazing. Do you want to hear the story of the Yarra?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, all right. Well, see, our ways of communicating, we don't write anything down, and writing things down is a powerful way to hold knowledge. And you could write something down now or computer it. In 200 years' time, someone could read it. So there's a real powerful way of communication, even into the future. Saying that, we didn't do it. So how do we communicate? So artworks, picture paints 1,000 words. So true with Aboriginal cultures. Now, we don't have rock arts as such here on country. And about 5 years ago, I would have said we didn't have petroglyphs. But we recently found petroglyphs on the Yarra River near Northland Shopping Centre. Quite amazing, actually. It's a map of country. If you ever see circles in Aboriginal art with wavy lines, it either means that the travelling route or song line, or could mean waterways as well. But with your human nature, where would you go for the best spots to live? This wet stuff out here, water, it's what we all need. So that's why, water and human interaction with the water and camp spots or ceremony grounds are always interconnected with our precious resource out here. Now, where rivers converge, such as this is the Mary, if anyone didn't know what this one was, and the Yarra, or the Birrarung, always have some sort of either, you could say, mythological importance or actual physical importance where ceremonies were conducted. The mythological one is sort of in this story. So it talks about a great murrel. In language, murrel is a big body of water or a big lake. Talks about the big murrel trapping the water of Wurundjeri country up in the mountains. So we're looking at the pretty much at the back of Healesville, King Lake, those sort of areas where this great lake may have been, according to this story. Talks about a mythological man who may have interconnected with actually a real man back in the day, but his name was Muyara. Muyara means fast and slow running or flowing. Talks about him wanting to release the water of the high country. He grabs a stone axe, and in Wurundjeri culture, the green stone axes are like, I suppose, in European culture, like gold, very valuable. They've been found 1,000 km away in southern Queensland and up through South Australia, and they're quarried from a place called Willem E. Moring. Willem, home E of Moring axe, home of the axe. Lancefield, Mount William they call it today. So I won't sort of go into that story, it's another story altogether. So it talks about them cutting the, Muyara cutting the river to release the water. Now the interesting part is, the first part of the story does not mention where the river flows today. The Yarra actually is one of the youngest, if not the youngest main river here in southeast Australia. I think it's only 10 to 13,000 years old. So this story's about that old. The Yarra's about as old as the Bay. They're similar sort of ages. The Maribyrnong and the Werribee are older water flows. So talks about him cutting the river past the place called Korhan Audible. Now, Corhan Audible is now called Dandenong Ranges. Dandenong comes from Tardanong, which means high point. So he talks about him cutting the river. The river's following him. He gets to a place called Kuirup, the great drainage system of the wetlands down there, which would have been like a mini Kakadu back in the day. And there was another drainage wetland of red gum forest at a place called Karam, which they call Karam Downs today, down south of Keysborough and those sort of areas. So the story says that the waters close up behind Muyara and until there's no water flowing at all. But the water that he was cutting formed another great lake. You would have heard of Moral losing my voice here. Moral Great Lake. Bark translate to Willarm. Willarm means home of the Great Lake. Where's this lake at Moral? It's not the Ludale Lake, by the way. It was a bigger one than that. It was the whole Yarra Valley. And I believe geologically Mount Lofty itself had slid down and blocked the river and formed this large lake. The actual pathway that the story talks about, I believe there are investigations in underground water flows around that particular area. It's going to be quite interesting when that information becomes more clearer. But if the old people said it, there's a reality to it. It's just sometimes we just don't find out in very quickly. See if you can translate this bit. It talks about Muyara still resides at Kuirup, and you can see the swan feathers landing on the mountains in the distance. How would you translate that? And they're not literal swan feathers. So,
Snow?
yeah, I read your lips, snow, and I heard your voice. So you read your lips and heard your voice. So snow is the right answer. So that's Borbor and Donabewang and those mountains up there. That's our eastern boundary. Borbor is sacred, means echo. It is sacred to the Gunai Kurnai as well because their rivers come from Borbor. The Birrarung comes from Borbor but the other way. The story actually says that Borbor, Donabewang and their brothers pushed the river in its current directions. It's talking about the mountain ranges up there. So the story then continues. Another man named Barwul and another fella named Yanyin. So Yanyin in language means young man. Manamanamik is young woman. So Yanyin is actually releasing another water body up at a place called Morang. So South Morang, you go up there. It's pretty hard to see these days. So many houses up there now, but it's red gum wetland. So that's where the Plenty River comes from Yanyin cutting to Plenty River. Barwul, he starts to cut through what we call Warren throw, diet where you're throwing it, through that gorge area through there. Talks about them converging at the Plenty Confluence. So the Plenty Confluence was a ceremony ground and also has a mythological value through this story. So then they hit this place. Merry in language is rocky. When Aboriginal people double up a word, say merry, it just emphasises the first word. So a heap of rocks. merry. The basalt, see? The basalt plains start from around here and go all the way past South Australian border. They're massive, if not one of the biggest in the world. So talks about them running out of access because of all the rock they got to cut through. But eventually the waters flow out into what we call Naarm, Geelong and Corio is the cultural names of Port Phillip Bay. So, but it talks about Bunjil placing a rock, I believe, at the heads, and that rock promises that the waters will not be flooding Woiwurrung country or Wurundjeri country. But what it did, it flooded Wathaurong and Bunwurrung country. So then they had, as part of cultural obligations, still had to meet one another. Big family, pretty much, the mobs around here. It was back in the day. It's a bit different today, so in some circumstances. But so the crossing place for the Wathaurong and Bunwurrung wasn't this one. It was the one down near the casino that they blew up to turn the ships around. There's a tiny little sign there near the Sandridge Rail Bridge that talks about the turning basin. It doesn't talk about this story that I'm telling you. But that was your gateway for any direction, south, east, west or north. So this one here, I'll continue the story and then I'll tell you about this one. But The river itself, this is where science can really help us understand our culture. You know when they were dredging the bay, they put in some samples into the bottom of the bay and come up with pollen samples from under the bay. Blew us away. Then they come up with a computer graphic of what type of vegetation was in the bay before it flooded as a bay. The Yarra flows on the Birrarung side. Birrarung is the traditional name of Arthur's Seat. Then it goes over a 90-metre waterfall near the Heads, which is a famous diving area now. Always wanted to go there, have a look. Then it goes down the land bridges, connects with the Tamar River in Tassie. Traditionally, there was connections through that whole area. But these stories we don't have pretty much, that I understand, older than the Yarra River story. The creation story is obviously older, but it's hard to put an age on that story because that's the beginning of time and how things came about. So this particular spot here, now I'll use an example that you've probably never thought of before because it's something we take for granted, but if all the bridges of Melbourne collapsed overnight, what would happen to the culture and society of Melbourne? It would grind to a halt. Crossing a waterway was very important today, and as it was traditionally. So if you didn't want to swim across or make a traditional canoe, where you could walk across became important areas for kind of like where highways meet as such, or what we call song lines. Song lines are a way of embedding knowledge through song and through memory. It's like driving along the road today. The signs on the side of the road give you direction of, you know, where to go, distance, speed limit, all that sort of stuff. Well, there were marker trees out there as well. We believe one of the oldest, if not the oldest marker tree is not too far upriver from here, a place called Heidi Gallery. And then if you've been to Heidi Gallery, it's that whopping great big red gum in the car park. It's about 500 years old. It's got a massive scar on it. We believe it's a marker tree for song lines going in many directions. Wherever like a main road arterial or a road that goes through the valleys and so forth or contours of hills and that, good chance they're Aboriginal song lines. So this area here, a report said that a stringy bark structure, see if you can translate this, a stringy bark structure with hieroglyphics written in white chalk. Were the Egyptians here with chalk? I don't know, how do you translate that? No, they obviously weren't, but what the hieroglyphics were our symbols. The white chalk is our white ochre. Any structure, I've only ever heard of a ceremonial structure here at Dights Falls. This is going to sound a little bit weird to the way we think today, but the least we know about a place, the more cultural importance it has, because the ceremonies conducted, I'll use modern day terms like religious ceremonies. If you were not part or didn't have a role within that ceremony, you were not allowed to be there. A man named King Billy, in the early days of Melbourne, said that he will fall away and die because a European had observed one of these ceremonies and started writing it down in a book. So the obligations to Bunjil, our creator, was so great on King Billy that he's actually believed he'd broken his obligations to Bunjil and he would die from that. So, and also the private side of culture, pretty much 99% of Aboriginal culture is communal or family connected. The only time you test it individually is your initiation. That's when the elders take you from camp. You have to prove to them that you have the knowledge and skills, maturity and responsibility to be an adult. The elders, it was very important because if the young boys didn't grow up and knowing how to track and sustain, hunting and so forth, and sustain themselves and their families, you wouldn't live 40,000 years, you wouldn't live a lifetime, you'd live about 40 days if you're lucky. And the women, if the girls didn't know the botany knowledge here on country, the seasonal availability and the preparations of traditional foods, you'd poison yourself and your children. So it's very important that these skills and knowledge were known by the elders, and you go through a process of initiation to prove that. Then you come on back into society, and it talks about a great joyful ceremony being conducted, because it's kind of like, well, at the convent. You've got another staff member at the convent, it sort of lightens the load a little bit on the employees that are there already. So same in a traditional, I suppose, context as well. Someone else to take their role within society. And there were many traditional roles. Narengita is like your Prime Minister. He's also a judge. Elders are like your government. Witty Giddy is your communicator. Withered is your physical and spiritual healer. Your warriors are your protectors, or your military. Your carers and teachers are your schooling system, which is basically everyone had a part of. We also had lawmen are like your police. Songmen are like your academics, your knowledge keepers, your universities. And interpreters were like your diplomats, because part of traditional culture, you had to speak the lingo of the land you're on. If you didn't, you were breaking the law. And traditional laws, you would be wounded. Something would happen to you to mark you, and something for you to remember, not to do it again, and others to know that you're a lawbreaker. It's kind of like, how laws are designed. That if people break them, there's punishment. Because we saw what happened about 6 months ago. A whole bunch of young fellas in Melbourne running around because they knew there was no punishment linked to what they were doing. So they just go out and they run amok. So traditional laws were set up that way. And it was our glue that binded society. That's why the Welcome to Country is a law ceremony, and you had to do it. And that little bit I added at the end about not being able to welcome you unless you respect country, people and culture, that's a message from my ancestors. That's not me saying that, that's them saying that. That's their law. And it's something that I believe is very strong, because when you are welcomed, there are responsibilities that are connected to that. And I'm trying to get a lot of our other elders to actually understand that, because too many welcome to countries happen without responsibility, or without what I would say, because I get a lot of people saying to me, Bill, I've been to welcome to countries before, but I never understood it. It wasn't explained. So once I started hearing that, I thought, well, I've got to get out there and explain this. So it creates a value to the people hearing it, and an understanding connected to it. So yeah, probably way over time, eh? I should have been looking over here. You're probably waving for the last 5 minutes. So. Yeah.
Awesome.
We'll go for a wander over here. Obviously, this is quite a peaceful sounding place. Something just jumped up there. And then we'll go over here, it's a noisy place. So there's a fish ladder over here to help the native fish get upstream, because our native fish population was very low upstream from Dights Falls. This place too is the only Aboriginal registered site in Melbourne that doesn't actually have tangible cultural heritage or stuff you can see or touch, but doesn't take the importance of these places away. It's like, Melbourne, big concrete jungle, just because it's concrete and big buildings on it doesn't take the cultural values from those areas, even though the visual values might have changed. So yeah, so we got this place registered, it's protected. Okay, we'll go for a wander over there. Yeah, sort of, on top of your head there, I didn't have any notes.